You may have wondered yourself, why is the South referred to as the Cavalier South? Unless you've never heard that term before, then you may not have wondered that. Well, after today's presentation, make sure to complete the review and keep track of the information in the PowerPoint as you will be using it to add to your collage. The southern region is called the Southern Colonies, or the Cavalier South, and it consists of Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. For those of you who geography is not your thing, you might have trouble remembering that. So might I suggest a mnemonic, like, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Everybody remembers that one from math class. How about this one from social studies? My vehicle, new car, slow car, goes. Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. We can try it even with the middle colonies. Check this one out. Neat yellow penguins, not jumping down. And how about the northern colonies? Nice hair mullet, man. Cut right in. 2 M's if you're counting Maine, which at this point in time was part of Massachusetts. Well, back to the southern colonies. Let's take a look at their economy. Of the 3 regions, the northern, the middle, and the southern was the largest and wealthiest of the regions. Even though the middle is called the breadbasket, this is the wealthiest. It's based on large-scale farming where they grow cash crops. The 3 biggest were tobacco, rice, and indigo. I know a lot of you are thinking, well, what about cotton? Yes, that was a major cash crop in the South, but that comes years later. In the South, these crops were grown on large plantations and small independent farms. Plantation life, these big plantations, they were a lot like the medieval manors that you learned about in previous units. You know, you had the river for easy transportation. You had, in this case, a plantation house instead of a castle or manor house. But these plantations were a lot like villages, self-sustaining communities with large, vast fields to grow their crops. So there was very little sense of community. On the small farms, though, most of them were poor farmers who owned small plots of land. And they were called, the farmers that farmed this land were called crackers because of the sound of the whip that they heard as they drove their plows through the land. Because of the hard work that a lot of people had during this time period, farming these cash crops, taking care of their families, life expectancies were a lot shorter. And that, again, has to do with the hard labor that they were doing. And in the South, it was really hot and really humid, and the days were longer, so people worked longer hours. As a result of the shorter life expectancy, most marriages lasted only 7 years. But these people that came over and settled in the South, the English, the Scots-Irish, the Welsh, and a few Germans, they were economically driven, wanting to make money. And so they wanted to replicate European society. They wanted to replicate the upper class of Europe. So they lived more like the English than, say, the colonists. And this led to wide social divisions where 10% of the population controlled 60% of the wealth. I know when we start throwing numbers out like that, that's hard to comprehend. So I have a little analogy. What if we said pizza equaled money? So this is an analogy here where the pizza is going to represent money, and 10% or 1 person is going to be able to have 6 slices of pizza, whereas another 3 people will have 3 slices of pizza, and then the other 6 people, or the other 60%, will only have about 10% of that wealth. So as you can see, small percentage of the people have all of the money, and a large population of people who are probably small, poor farmers, indentured servants, and even slaves owned very little or were very poor. And this brings us to the idea of slavery in the South. You would have learned that the first slaves arrived in Jamestown in the year 1619, and some of them did become indentured servants. But even before that, Europeans were enslaving the natives of the land, but many of those died from the disease. Indentured servants continued to come over as people couldn't pay for their passage to the Americas. But in an economically driven society, uh, these large scale farms realized that purchasing slaves, one payment equaled a lifetime in labor, and all they had to do to maintain that was to give food, clothing, and shelter, which during these time periods wasn't very good anyway. As a result of the slavery and the enslavement of Africans in the southern colonies, you do get the assimilation of slaves into European traditions and cultures, where you start to see the development of different languages like the Creole languages, and many African slaves convert to Christianity. As for the settlers of the area, education was not of the utmost concern for most people because everything was so spread out. Schools were not really possible because it just served too big of an area and it took too long to get to the school. So education was not offered publicly. It was limited to the rich, the people who could afford private tutors. And as a result, very few schools and very few universities emerged out of this region. But one of the most prestigious and first is the College of William and Mary, located down in Virginia. So here we see that, school was reserved for the children of the rich. And most other children either hunted, fished, or they helped out on the family farm. And for girls, it was helping around the house and to raise the family. So a little snapshot of the southern colonies: Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. Remember, my vehicle, new car, slow car goes. I hope you enjoyed your journey, and go take that review and add some things to your collage. See ya.